Joining me today on the show of Crossfire is someone who has taken biggest social media giants of the world to courts in Delhi. He is also someone who has fought for the freedom of expression for many illustrious journalists to think tank specialists and to analysts and authors. Today, he is actually a member of a political party where he's also led a campaign in the recently held civic polls. But his biggest achievement till date also remains the fact that he has taken these social media giants and proved that nothing is bigger than the court of law. Welcome to the show, Mr. Raghav Awasthi. I want to actually congratulate you for the kind of battles that you have led in the Indian courts and fought for the freedom of expression, defended the rights of many illustrious people, including prominent author Vikram Sampath and Aarti Tikku, a prominent journalist, and also many such more people of this country. At a time when Elon Musk says that Twitter is the only source of truth following the controversy of what happened in Davos in Switzerland regarding the Pfizer CEO, where Facebook and YouTube and other social intermediaries banned the relay of that interview or the conduct of that interview. How do you see fighting these legal battles in the court and how difficult or easy they were?
See, I think fighting courtroom battles is never easy. I think a lot of research goes into each and every draft when it is being prepared. And then in court, of course, it's like being in the trenches, where the bullets can come raining down upon you at any moment. Having said that, I really do feel that the stand that we took in quite a few cases
Such as?
against Twitter, like we had represented one of your editors, Aarti Tikku, and then after that, I've been representing some other people. That stand has been vindicated by the Twitter files completely. We now know that not just in the Indian context, but also in the American context, there were Twitter officials who were actively tasked with promoting a certain agenda. And we now know that the story in relation to Hunter Biden's laptop, which I think was broken by the New York Post, which is supposedly right-leaning journal in the US, was also being censored. And in the Indian context, around 2021 April, when there were a lot of people who were thinking that now Narendra Modi's star has fallen, you could see Twitter being up to its usual tricks. There were some tweets of Mr. Sambit Patra, who is a spokesperson, very celebrated national spokesperson of the BJP, under which Twitter wrote manipulated media. And there are so many claims that were made by Rahul Gandhi at that point in time and that were relayed through his official Twitter handle that were not similarly censored or labeled. And then I think during one of her depositions, I don't remember before which authority, Vijaya Gade had also said that, like, she had basically admitted that when it comes to the BJP, there was some censorship that was being done. And so you find this pervasive pattern here wherein people who, let us say, who are BJP supporters or who belong to the Indic wing, were being suppressed. Their right to free speech was being suppressed on Twitter. And there was a reason for that. I really do feel that Twitter at that point in time was acting as an arm of the American deep state. And since it was acting as an arm of the American deep state, it felt that it should do the bidding of the American deep state. And of course, the American deep state would be, it stands to reason that they would be antagonistic towards any leader like Mr. Narendra Modi, under whose leadership India is now being talked up, not just in India, but across the world as a rival to China. So they would be really interested in undermining his leadership. And it is really unfortunate that Twitter, uh, I don't expect so much of Twitter, but to me, the real disappointing part is that there were so many people of Indian origin in who were working in India as Twitter employees, and of course, there were many people who were working elsewhere. Who were acting as some sort of brown sepoys. I'll give you a very small example. You look at Abhijit Iyer Mitra's case. He had all that he had tweeted without any personal details being given out was that a certain journalist from NDTV called Srinivasan Jain. I'll repeat his name, Srinivasan Jain. And as a matter of fact, his father has been accused of undermining India's position after the nuclear tests when he was High Commissioner to South Africa. So we know what his credentials are. So he had stood as surety to Mohammed Zubair. And this fact was something that was tweeted out by Mr. Mitra, and Twitter censored him. And they said that unless you delete this tweet, we will not allow you to get back onto this platform. And his case is, as a matter of fact, still pending before the Delhi High Court.
But he has returned to Twitter.
He's returned to Twitter because under the new regime, what has happened is that they removed that condition. But we have to figure out what happened before that. And we also need to emphasize that although Twitter might have a new management at the helm, whom we can't trust completely, right? As of now, the indicators seem to be good, and maybe they are committed to free speech as an absolute value. But there are still platforms like Google and YouTube, and also Meta platforms that are being run by the same kind of people who will actively try not just to influence elections in India, but also I'm 100% sure that they will try and somehow oppose Mr. Narendra Modi. And we can't ultimately look, if Mr. Narendra Modi is to be defeated in an election, then and the people of India say that okay, we don't want him to be in power, so be it. But ultimately, we cannot have a foreign corporation, or we can't have foreign corporations that are accountable only to their shareholders and their lords and masters in the American deep state
So you mean
to
to
be
say,
influencing elections here.
so if I may ask you, considering that the new digital media ethics code and the intermediary rules are being implemented in this country, proposed by the Ministry of Information Technology, do you actually believe at the moment that there is an attempt to force them to reconcile with the Indian laws and they will be made accountable, or do you still believe that having fought these battles in the court of law, that it's still difficult for anyone in Indian context, the Indian officials of these companies, to be accountable in the court of law?
So I think this is a very interesting question, and we need to look at these rules first. So, as per the intermediary rules of 2021, there is a very specific procedure laid down in case you want to delete somebody's post as an intermediary, or you want to delete somebody's account, right? And those parameters have been laid down, and there are only specific grounds under which you can do that suo moto, unless, of course, there is a court order. So, if we go back to the Shreya Singhal judgment, it very clearly said that unless there is a court order, nothing can be removed and nobody will be removed. Then these intermediary rules came in, and Rule 31B lays down a specific set of circumstances under which this can be done. Over and above, let's say, if there is a court order and something is found to be defamatory. So, if your case doesn't fall within any of these parameters, the company, these intermediaries cannot remove anything that you write, and they cannot even remove you from the platform. And if they do it, then there is something known as Rule 4, Clause 8, under which they first have to give you notice, then they have to listen to your explanation, and then there is an appellate procedure that has been laid down. So there is a very elaborate process in place. However, in practice, these guidelines were not being followed. What was happening was that these people were doing their own labeling. They were deleting accounts of people whom they thought were
Not matching their
not
ideology.
matching their ideology. And the problem in our country, as it is so often, was that of enforcement. Yes. So the problem is that most people do not have the resources to go to court. And for most people, except let's say if somebody is a journalist or somebody is working as a social media influencer, social media is something that you do in your free time, right? So you don't want to spend any money or time, let's say if you have a job, to try hard to get your account restored or some of your posts restored. So what we have done through our work till now is only exposing the tip of the iceberg, right? There are hundreds of thousands of people who are being censored right now, and this is a danger that we cannot remain unmindful of as a country, because as I said, this is how the East India Company started to operate. The East India Company essentially was a trading corporation. What they used to do was to take Indian products to Britain and sell them at an inflated price, which is okay. I mean, that was a commercial enterprise. But eventually, what happened was that from a trading corporation, they morphed into something else. So something similar is happening now. And if you remember, initially, like you had cases where the Nawab of Bengal passed some orders, and these people said that the East India Company said that they will not comply with it, right? And something similar is happening now, wherein you have these intermediary guidelines, and these people are not complying with it.
Right.
So essentially, they are flipping the bird to the sovereign government of India.
Right.
and we are sitting here and we are doing nothing, and before we know it, we might be ruled by these people. Some accountable tech czar sitting in the US will be controlling us through his platform, in a manner that is akin to how, there used to be a Secretary of State for Indian Affairs sitting in London, and just conducting affairs in India.
Do things actually become brighter for the Indian democracy from here on, considering the new rules will be in place soon, and it's still in a draft stage where there is a discussion going on largely between the ministry and the stakeholders. Considering that when people like Elon Musk take charge of a platform like Twitter, where he proudly announces, discloses what happened in the last decade or so, then removes the officials who were at the helm of the organization responsible for either the misinformation or the censorship. Do you feel that the things will only become brighter from here on, or for the Indian democracy, or do you think that it will be very difficult still to drag people in the courts of law and fight for them?
I think Elon Musk's ascension to the helm of Twitter is a positive signal. But we can't lose sight of the fact that if you look at the three tech giants, as in Google, Meta platforms, and Twitter, Twitter is actually the smallest.
Of them all.
So, yeah, smallest of these three. So, even now, like when it comes to YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, people with similar ideological predilections are in charge. So there is censorship that is happening, and there are many people who are still suffering under this jackboot of censorship. And as I said, this is not all these attempts to gag free speech in India are not innocent at all. There is a larger agenda at play. And if you look at these Western countries, their playbook hasn't actually changed for the last 200 years. It's the same. Initially, you come in as a trading corporation, then you start with fiddling a little bit, testing the waters to see as to how much you can interfere in our in Indian internal affairs and get away with it. And then before you know it, these people are going to take charge, and that's highly unfortunate.
In that case, Mr. Awasthi, it also sort of brings me to another interesting question, considering the fact that you talked about gagging being not the right step by the social intermediaries. But on the contrary, I must also ask you a very pointed query today that, coming as it does, Prime Minister's recent address to the national executive, the two-day national executive of the Bharatiya Janata Party, it comes at a crucial time when there is an outrage against the movies like Lal Singh Chaddha, Pathan, for that matter, and even a movie which was shot in the locales of Varanasi, Banaras, where we saw the recent resurrection of Kashi Vishwanath Temple, featuring the movie featuring Ranbir and Alia Bhatt. Now, when such outrage calls are made or social media boycott calls are made, do you concur with these boycott calls? One, do you also sort of want to bring into account the appeals made by an actor like Sunil Shetty when he meets the UP's Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, known for his scruples and known for his stand for the cause of Hindutva, that Bollywood at some stage was not amenable to the idea of protecting the fate of the larger community of this country, and rather finding one way or the other to demean that faith.
See, with Bollywood, we have to understand. I mean, I'm only a student of Indian cinema. I'm not a scholar or anything. But I think if you look at the time up until the 50s and 60s, right? So you had many movies that were being made on religious themes and patriotic themes that were doing very well. But something changes around the 1960s when the Marxists start taking over. So you have people like K. Asif, right, who glorify this Akbar fellow and try to, make him him into some sort of a larger than life figure. When the truth is that he didn't even rule the whole country. Like in his lifetime, he didn't venture far beyond the Deccan, far beyond the Vindhyas, and he never was able to control Gujarat or Bengal properly. And even where Rana Pratap is from, Rana Pratap held out. So he was not the emperor of Hindustan, but these people try to portray him as some sort of a great, benevolent, munificent emperor of Hindustan,
So
which
much
was
that the movie is made Jodha Akbar.
So Jodha Akbar comes later. I'll just come to it. And then in the 70s, you if you watch Diwar, so Diwar has many dialogues that have just, made their way into everyday parlance, right? So you have Diwar wherein Amitabh Bachchan is there, and Amitabh Bachchan is supposed to be this atheist, and he says that he will not go into a temple, right? And he doesn't even partake of prasad when it comes from his mother. And Amitabh Bachchan's character still carries that 786, जो उसका जो बिल्ला है, that he's still carrying.
Correct.
So the idea is to somehow demean the Hindu religion and also to glorify some other religion at the expense of the Hindu religion. So this attempt gets more and more insidious as we move towards the 80s. And during the 80s, what happens is that this underworld funding starts coming in, and this is the time around which Dawood Ibrahim is, Dawood Ibrahim is growing as a gangster in Mumbai.
Right.
So this is around the time when he's decimated the Pathan gang, and the Mumbai police, is Bombay police as it was, is trying to build him up as some sort of a some sort of a counterpoise to the likes of Kareem Lala and all who were there earlier,
Right.
who were also funding Bollywood movies. But in the 80s, this anti-Hindu sentiment gets more and more pronounced, right? And Gems of Bollywood has done an excellent task in
And
documenting
this actually goes
all
on
of these
right till
instances.
till the Bombay blast.
Till the Bombay blast, it keeps
When they
going
get
on,
exposed.
and you watch something like Heather.
Right.
Heather basically gives you the terrorist's perspective,
Right.
right? And this movie was made in 2014, and you look at let's say, and there are many examples. Like if you look at Shah Rukh Khan's movies, right, and you look at Chak De India. In Chak De India, this whole idea of Muslim victimhood is something that is sold, and it was a big hit because the Hindu masses are gullible. They don't know the truth. They don't know the truth of the fact that Shah Rukh Khan, I think, has been found to be in public endorsing the likes of Zakir Naik, and we know that Zakir Naik was a terrorist. So Zakir Naik's soft evangelical Islamist agenda was being shoved down our throats. So these people are, part of the same cabal, and they are playing to the same gallery. And I'm not saying that all of Bollywood has to be tarred with the same brush, right? It's an industry in which like hundreds of thousands of people are working. But if there is one particular movie, you take the case of Pathan, right? So what is great about Pathan is that, I mean, there is nothing great about Pathan in as much as you've shown this actress who is clearly over the hill now, and she's facing a lot of competition from the likes of Ananya Pandey, and she's gyrating in a saffron colored bikini, and like she is leaving nothing to the imagination. Like she's on her knees, right? She's on her knees, and nothing is being left to the imagination. And then this guy is saying Besharam Rang. Somebody is singing in the background Besharam Rang. So what is it that they are trying to show? At a subliminal level, they are trying to say that the color saffron is something that is Besharam or shameless. So we should not fall prey to this Prithviraj Chauhan syndrome, and we should be like, okay, now this guy is coming to us and saying, okay, don't boycott my film. So we should not boycott his film. We should definitely boycott his films, because boycotting their films is the only way in which we can get them to create content that's better, right? And I think this is something similar that happened in the case of Family Man. Family Man is a web series on Amazon. So Family Man season 1 was totally different, and Family Man season 2 is totally different, and themes of love, jihad, and all are being touched on. So ultimately, I think this boycott is a very potent weapon that is in our hands. And if we want them to reform, because ultimately it's an industry that and like any other industry, it cares about its bottom line. When if you are hitting them at the bottom line, then what is going to happen is that they are going to change tack.
So in that case, if I may ask you here, a very necessary question that your critics or my critics for having conducting this interview may ask me a very piercing question, which I want to ask from you through them. That, for instance, if we talk about the boycott calls, let's not also forget the same actress who you mentioned wearing the sporting the bikini in saffron color. She was recently decorated at a premier event like FIFA. She also continues to remain a brand ambassador for world's biggest fashion houses such as Louis Vuitton. How do you explain the decoration being given to this actor if India continues to berate her and tries to make her accountable for what she did wrong, which you think is wrong, which I think is wrong. But at the same time, parallelly, she is being decorated on a throne and on a pulpit where she is being told that she can be a brand ambassador for Louis Vuitton and also holds the trophy for FIFA World Cup.
So I think as far as Deepika Padukone is concerned, I think these actors are being given too much credit. If you look at some of her interviews, I remember there was this 2011 interview that she gave when this, what's the name of the movie, Arakshan, came out. And she talked about how Rahul Gandhi was the great youth leader who was going to completely reform the country. So I don't think these people should be given too much credit. Having said that, the reason why the FIFA World Cup people invited her, I mean, it was because they know that in India, as of now, like although at one point in time we used to be a football country wherein our team actually won something in football, we were the Asian champions in 1962. As on date, we have no football stars. So they thought that one way to garner eyeballs from India, which is a big market, right, 1.4 billion people, is to get this actress to actress at the World
So
Cup
you think it
trophy
was a
event.
market gimmick?
So it was a marketing gimmick targeted at her Instagram following. So I think she has some, I think, I'm not sure, but her Instagram following is in millions. So it's a marketing gimmick. I don't think she was there to represent India. Yes, they had her there because they thought that her Instagram followers would now also follow this event. And she was not the only one. There were other Instagram influencers who were flown in from India, not just to the FIFA World Cup, but even this T20 World Cup had many Instagram influencers who had gone from here and they were being paid by the authorities, paid by the organizers. So there is nothing new. And as far as this JNU thing is concerned, one thing is very clear that after that, this movie Chapak, or I don't know, Chapak, or I don't remember the exact title of the movie. It actually portrayed a very sensitive theme, right? And it should have been a movie that that probably ought to have had more success than that. But the movie bombed after her appearance. So we need to keep hitting these people where it hurts most. But yeah, and it's really that is why boycott calls are really important.
Right. Uh, now that you've addressed so many issues regarding the social media, I would also, before I wrap up this interview, I would also ask you a very pointed question that, Mr. Awasthi, how difficult or easy it is for an average taxpayer to reach the court through people, eminent lawyers like you today, uh, to represent their cases, fighting for their freedom of expression, or even for taking the sensitive issues like boycott calls. How much does it cost? I mean, let's say, and how much does a trial these days on an average take in such cases?
So first of all, I don't think I'm an eminent lawyer. I am just a very, very humble servant of Mother India and an even more humble servant of the BJP. And yes, lawyering is something that I do in order to pay my bills. I don't consider myself to be an eminent lawyer. I don't think the costs are very high, you know. Of course, if you're filing a suit before a civil court, the court fees has to be paid. But in suits like this, if you are seeking an injunction or a declaration and not actual compensation, you can value the suit at whatever you want to value it at. So if you're filing in Delhi, then the court fees is around 1% or whatever you're valuing the suit at.
Right.
So that's a good thing. The other thing which people can do is to apply for local commissioner trials and accelerate the whole process. And although the idea behind these suits is to try and get relief at the very first hearing in the form of interim relief.
Right.
So this is also something that happens here and there. But I think now with these new tribunals that will be formed, new specialized tribunals, it would be even easier because I think these specialized tribunals can really met out summary justice, and these social media platforms can be held accountable.
Which also sort of forces me to ask you a question that actually, because of the fact that you wear your political leanings on your sleeves, does it affect when you represent the court of the law? I mean, is it similar to what the Sibbals or the Tiwaris or the Salman Khurshid's also did for a long part of their career, that they were part of the Congress and yet they continue to represent corporate houses from Tatas to Coca-Colas to so on to fight their cases in the court?
So I think probably, I mean, there are no easy answers to these questions. I don't think it affects it so much. Ultimately, if you are doing a good job in court, people would like you to represent them.
Correct.
And I always keep saying that, look, even the best lawyers have a success rate that is in the band of 50 to 70%. So that's like that's where the best lawyers are. So it's about doing a good job on each and every brief that you are that any client is kind enough to hand over to you, because it's a huge responsibility. But politics is something that you have to do, or anybody who's a lawyer. I mean, so you have to do both. It's like having a side gig, right? And I was very fortunate to have been afforded this privilege to also work for the greatest political party that the world has ever seen in the history of political parties. I think the BJP is the biggest, and you have Mr. Narendra Modi, who is somebody who has been voted in by the greatest number of voters that the world has ever seen. And therefore, it's a great honor and a privilege to have been associated with a party like this, and to have been associated with the with this municipal corporation of Delhi campaign. And I'll just give you some interesting stats about it. So if you look at the Vidhan Sabha election, the Aam Aadmi Party had polled 52% of the popular vote, while the BJP was at 40%. Now the gap has been bridged to a significant extent, and a lot of media houses are not willing to admit it. The gap between the BJP and the Aam Aadmi Party in an essentially bipolar election is now just 2 percentage points. Right. So we have managed to shave off 10 percentage points of their 2020 tally, while increasing around 1% to ours. So I think it was a very close photo finish, and it augurs really well for the BJP for the Vidhan Sabha elections in 2025, and also the Lok Sabha elections. And what the results also show is that although it was a narrow loss, and the losses for the BJP were confined primarily to the area where we are sitting in, that's South Delhi and parts of New Delhi. But in the rest of the city, it performed quite admirably. So I think, I think it can be a very good challenger to the incumbent, and hopefully it will be a successful challenge.
Of course. On this note, I thank you, Mr. Awasthi, for this pleasure having you on our show. And we wish you all the best for a stellar career in law, and also your political career as well.
Thank you.